NHS England has confirmed that children will no longer be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. The government said it welcomed the landmark decision, which they say is in the best interests of children. Puberty blockers, which pause the physical changes of puberty, will now only be available to children as part of clinical research trials.
Before we get into this, guys, let's see what BBC News has to say in regards to this. This is the BBC News. NHS England to stop prescribing puberty blockers. Very deceiving title. The Tavistock Centre. Children will no longer routinely be prescribed puberty blockers at gender identity clinics. NHS England has confirmed. The decision comes after a review found there was not enough evidence they are safe or effective. Puberty blockers, which pause the physical changes of puberty, will now only be available as part of research. It comes weeks before an independent review into gender identity services in England is due to be published. An interim report from the review, published in 2022 by Dr. Hilary Cass, remember that name, guys, had earlier found there were gaps in evidence around the drugs and called for transformation in model of care for children with gender-related distress. Dr. Cass's review follows a sharp rise in referrals to the Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, run by the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, which saw an increase from 250 per year to over 5,000 in 2022. Okay, wow. Don't get excited, guys. Don't get excited. The powers that be haven't grown a moral conscience and stopped this barbaric practice, okay, called giving puberty blockers to children. That's not what's happening here. The powers that be have not developed a moral conscience. That's not what has happened here. All that has basically happened is that an independent review was conducted and it was found that there was, and I quote, not enough evidence that they are safe or effective, which doesn't come as a surprise to me one bit, to be honest with you. This review was published in 2022 by Dr. Hilary Cass, called the Cass Review. Again, just because this review says that it found flaws in the current clinical model and how it's provided, it does not mean that this is not part of a bigger agenda, guys. All right? It does not mean that this is not part of a bigger agenda to make puberty blockers even more accessible. Let's not forget. It's not as if they have made puberty blockers illegal. They have simply stated that the current clinical model with a single national provider is not sustainable in the long run. And I quote, at present, there is a single specialist service providing gender identity services for children and young people. The Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, at the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust. All right? As a result of there being only one single specialist service providing gender identity services, Tavistock, it has resulted in long waiting lists. Due to the long waiting list, they fear that children that suffer from gender dysphoria are not being diagnosed and assessed properly. And as a result, puberty blocker pills are being irresponsibly prescribed. Of course, the only reason why this happened, in my opinion, was because of the Cara Bell case in 2020. In fact, that's exactly why it happened. It was because of the Cara Bell case in 2020. Quincy Bell, known publicly as Cara Bell, took Tavistock Clinic and Portman NHS Trust to court. Cara Bell's case against Tavistock was that young people under 16 are unable to give consent to puberty blockers and that the information given to the patients by the Tavistock Clinic is misleading and insufficient. The High Court, surprisingly enough, guys, the High Court first ruled in favor of Cara Bell by saying that a child under the age of 16 was unlikely to be what they called Gillick competent to consent to puberty blocker treatment. And I agree with that. So what happened? Guess what? In September 2021, the Court of Appeal overturned the High Court judgment by saying parents are allowed to give consent on behalf of their children to receive puberty blockers. What a wicked, 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 wicked world, man. And conveniently, we have a Cass review in 2022. and conveniently. All right. I personally think, here's what I personally think, guys. I personally think that the K Rebel case was a big blow to the puberty blocker agenda. And the CAS review is their way of gaining public trust that they have children's best interest at heart. That's their way of doing it. They want to gain that public trust again, all right, because of the Kara case. As you can see, this independent review, the CAS review, to me is nothing but a ploy to make puberty blockers even more accessible by giving the impression that the problems that they had in the past have not only been identified by the CAS review, but they have taken steps to rectify it. I predict personally that we are going to see a lot of funding being poured into these so-called research trials, since this is the only way of prescribing the pills. That's just my opinion, but this is what I predict. This is what's going to end up happening, especially with the waiting list that they have. The number of children suffering from gender dysphoria has dramatically increased from 2016 to 2022. More than 7,500 are on the waiting list, guys. That's a lot of people that need to be seen. Come on. Of course, they are going to build more clinics to carry out research trials in order to cope with the demand, which means more puberty blockers will be prescribed. The CAS review, which led to NHS not prescribing puberty blockers, to me is nothing more than a method to clean up the damage that the K Rebel case against Tavistock caused and to regain public trust on puberty blockers. That's what I basically think it is, all right? Okay, so listen, guys, to me, puberty blockers are anti-human and evil. Not to me. Objectively speaking, puberty blockers are anti-human and evil. I would say to those people suffering from gender dysphoria, find other ways of dealing with gender dysphoria that doesn't include suppressing the natural release of your hormones that allows your body to grow naturally. I haven't even touched on why we are getting so many gender dysphoria cases. In my opinion, the reason why is because of what they are teaching children in schools. They are telling kids that being attracted to the same sex is good, not to mention the fact that it's promoted everywhere in the media. I mean, literally everywhere. Cartoons, movies, you name it. It's literally everywhere. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the reaction. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time, guys. Peace.